Oh, today discussing corporal punishment in schools. It's still a thing. It still seems to be happening, and definitely want to know what everybody's thoughts are on that because I don't even know if that's still a controversial topic. On the other side. So how's everybody out there doing? I'm Charles. A few of the other guys will be joining in a little bit. But even if not, we're gonna rock this party and have it out. Now listen, apparently there are still some states that are having corporal punishment in their schools. And this is a topic that comes up. We've covered this topic before on the Eight Black Hands. I've had other conversations about this. People have been surprised when I have talked about my experience of when I was a student in Kentucky and corporal punishment was implemented there. I never had those issues with teachers or whatnot in that school setting because I had my own parents. I had to worry about my own forms of corporal punishment back in that day and in those times. But apparently, still in 2024, there are these issues of corporal punishment. So there's an article that had come out, and Dave had linked it to us. So I'm gonna pull up that article because I think it's an interesting topic. So let's see. So in that, the article talks about Florida student seized on parental rights to stop educators from hitting kids. An 18-year-old honor student says a spanking at her school went disturbingly beyond discipline. Now she's joined a student effort to fight back. So, hey, David, how you doing?
Hello, sir.
I'm gonna jump back in there in a little bit. I wanted to finish this little part that I was in. So, apparently, here in this story, this is the story that was linked, that David had linked a while ago. And like I said, when I lived in Kentucky, in our principal's office, there was this paddle, kind of a paddle that's similar to that you would see from a fraternity or a sorority type person. And they were not afraid to use it. It was common knowledge. It was and to be quite frank with you, at that time, parents and the community was it wasn't controversial in that moment, in that place. Those were places where they tell you what the discipline policy was, and I think you could actually opt your kid out of it if you had wanted to. But my city folk friends, all my friends east and north of the South or the South Midwest and on the West Coast were mortified when they hear that I went to a school that had this type of policy. And I would go on to tell them that there were many parents from that community in that place that not only supported it, but would be vehemently against you taking that away. And so this story caught national attention because this particular case went, from this student said, it went way beyond that. It went far beyond just what the ramifications of corporal punishment should or shouldn't be. We'll put the story in context, and we'll put the story in the chat so you can read on your own. But the larger question is this, because this particular story is what it is. But let's have a conversation with the fellas about corporal punishment in schools. What is your reaction to knowing that it still happens today? And have you yourselves ever had to deal with corporal punishment in your school setting?
Yeah, I'll hop in here. Thanks for taking the lead here, Charles. I think just to back up a little bit, I too, and I was in elementary school long before you were, Charles. So, but I do remember growing up, never having been like hit in school, but our principal did have a paddle on the wall, and that was kind of enough for us. And I think up until like high school, then like those kinds of things went away. But I know that it happened in my elementary school, and that's in California. So this story stuck out to me for a couple of different reasons. There's several different elements, but I think what I was really shocked to kind of, well, I was just shocked that corporal punishment is still allowed in schools, number one. Um, and then to learn that it's actually still permitted in 19 states,
Mm-hmm.
right? There are 19 states where this is still kind of allowed in some way, shape, or form. Um, and then, looking at the states that, there's a correlation between states that still allow corporal punishment and politics, right? Many of them tend to be like red states. Many of them tend to be states where, these things like book banning is happening. They're trying to get books out of libraries, right? But for some reason, it's okay and allowed, um, to for adults to put hands on kids. I don't even know if they have to call the family before or after, or they just do it and the kid goes home and is like, I got hit today. Um, so I was just shocked to recognize, to understand and learn that 19 states still is allowed in some way, shape, or form. Florida being one of them. Yep.
Yeah. And before we go to you, Omar, there's actually some private schools in California. One in Oakland, at least one in Oakland,
Mm-hmm.
where especially in the elementary school, corporal punishment is still permitted. These you tend to find these in private schools that are parochial schools. If there's like a religious tent there, a lot of Catholic schools will take the ruler to your knuckles. Or things of that nature, or if you were left-handed, every time you use your left hand instead of your right to teach you. I'm left-handed, so those stories stick out to me a lot. But Omar, it's good to see you, brother. We've just jumped into this larger topic and conversation about corporate punishment happening in schools, and this is one of those topics that's kind of tough, right? Because I don't know if there's even gonna be lines of controversy amongst us. But it might be. I don't know. Let me get your original take. How do you feel about the topic of corporal punishment in education and the fact that it still exists in 19 states?
I mean, dude, come on. like, I'll be dead honest with our audience to let them know kind of how I feel about this. That it's the same way that they're going to feel. But I want to bring some thoughts and some evidence and some nuance to the subject, because I don't think the controversy, gentlemen, is going to be about how we feel about corporal punishment. I think the controversy is going to be this like engrossed battle between like parent rights, right? Where do the parents have the right and the ability to have a lot of say so in what happens in our schools, because we advocate for a lot of parent voice and a lot of parent rights. And then where the school decides, we kind of are experts on this subject. And this is where I think where parents' rights have, I would not a lapse, but ultimately say like, this is where it meets with where we have to come together as a state organization, as a governmental organization, and provide support. So like, let me just start out with a personal anecdote. I got my ass paddled in my private elementary school. And I got to tell you, like, it was a very odd and dehumanizing thing, because I'll tell you, like, I got into trouble. They whipped out the paddle and they started paddling me, and I started laughing. I was like, this is a joke. And then when they saw that my reaction was that, I then had to turn around and feign crying, because I'm like, I'm going to get 10 times more punished for laughing at this corporal punishment situation than acquiescing to the subjugation that they're causing in a child. And like, that has me really bothered, because corporal punishment is this like very antiquated ideology of like subjugation, bro. And I would arguably say, like, whether you want to take that into the way that the Singaporeans cane their people for like chewing gum and shit, or a very, very tumultuous history in this country in terms of bondage, slavery, subjugation, the genocide of Native Americans when they wouldn't acquiesce, the extraordinary lengths of punishment that blacks went through, well through Jim Crow, even to this day, in order to, like, quote, know your place. Shit's, to a far lesser degree, but still existing amongst Mexicans. I'm like, this is a fear-based ideology that has no place in a school, because school should be about relationship building. And you'll find that, like, and I hate to make this comparison, but I'm going to make this comparison. There is not a psychological or scientific study out there that demonstrates that hitting and punishing your dog has massive negative effects.
Sure.
It's all about the reward system. It's all about and that's how you get the best responses from your dog. I am not trying to our audience, I ain't sitting here trying to make a perfect parallel between dogs and kids, but I will say this, ladies and gentlemen, I've been in the education game for a long time, and the decisions I make have insane levels of research, experience, scientific backing. I have found that a positive reward incentive system for children, 9 out of 10, has incredible effects. And if you're wondering, well, what's that 1 out of 10? Well, man, that's like talks with parents. That's high-level restorative justice work. But punishing a kid by smacking the shit out of them, and some parents are very like, that's what I want. And I think that's the topic that we need to get into. Right. May work, but like in Texas, y'all, and I'll stop after this. It's the parent's decision. If they say to the school, I'm okay with your child providing I'm okay with the school providing corporal punishment. That's my right as a parent to say, you have the right to do this. It is totally legal in the state of Texas. So if a parent tells me as a superintendent or any of our principals, you have the right to corporally punish kids, which we don't, like, that right exists. Wow. And I think I'll get into it later into the show, but like, that's the controversy. If parents advocate for it, I think it's one thing about us choosing to be like, cool, like, you're okay with it, but we're going to move in a different direction. But like, some schools are like totally okay with it, and they whip out that fraternity paddle, and they're just like slap happy assholes out there just smacking the shit out of kids. And I wonder if the controversy is less about whether it's cool or not to do it, or whether or not we should be obeying parents' commands to do it.
Yeah, man. I wanted to just for the record,
it's insane. It's insane, David.
So the 19 states that currently allow public school personnel, and just keep in mind it says public school personnel, because private schools can still do this. Are Alabama, Arkansas, Arizona, Colorado, Florida, Georgia, Idaho, Indiana, Kansas, Kentucky, my old Kentucky home, Louisiana, Missouri, Mississippi, North Carolina, Oklahoma, South Carolina, Tennessee, Texas, and Wyoming. And I think you said some things before it go. And David, I'll give you back control of your show just in a moment. I'll just finish here, because I do think that that's the piece, right? The piece that I think that lay people that may not live in those places that might be missing is this isn't done in a vacuum away from parents. This is done. You can opt your kids out or opt your kids in, and there are some people that want this. Now, listen, let me be very honest. Like, I grew up, like, I had my father and my mother, even though they were both in and out of home because of issues they had, drugs, whatever the case is. But discipline was a part of my home. My dad was a Marine, and I'm sure that's the way his mommy and daddy did it, and that's the way theirs did it, dating all the way back to slavery times. That's that history, right? Like, my family is very much of, at that time, was a spare the rod, spoil the child type of situation. And let me be very honest. I mean, I have a lot more resources than my parents did. I have a different level of education. I make a lot more money. Like, my stress level is something very different. And I'm talking to two, you know what I'm saying, to two other immigrant folks whose parents are like came here from other places, or their parents came here from other places. And I don't know if you got spanked or the threat of spanking, but I'm sure you're familiar with it in some form or fashion. Now, look, I'm not going to have an ethnocentric viewpoint and judge my parents or his parents or whatever the case was, because I'm going to be very honest with you. If my father was not in the home and was not the authoritative figure in my life, I promise you, I probably would have ran over them. I'm just going to be completely honest. I had a lot of friends that did not have a father, so much to the point where friends' mothers have called my dad over to discipline or at least talk to their children with a different level of authority. And this is one of those conversations that normally don't leave out of your neighborhood. It doesn't leave out of that black bubble, that Mexican bubble, that Southeast Asian bubble, or whatever the case is. But as I've talked to people and other, like, I thought it was just a black thing. I've talked to people of other races, and this has kind of been a thing, right? Where that single mom has had to call her brothers or her uncles over, or her son's uncles over to have a different type of conversation because of how he's running in. Now, I'm not making any excuses for any of this stuff, but I just don't want to fully shit on my parents and my grandparents and the people that we probably grew up with. Now, I think it is absurd in the year of our Lord 2024 that this is still a thing in schools. But like you said, Omar, this is something that's happening that parents and these people are asking for. I don't know if we're about to have a states' rights conversation or whatever the case was, but I would be remiss if we did not have a conversation that broached the issue of corporal punishment in homes. And it's not just a people of color thing. I went to school with a lot of Southern white kids, and I've seen them get smacked before too. So I just want to let you all at least chime in on that. And David, then the reins are back to you. And I only say that, David, because a lot of people that listen to our stuff tend to be coastal people or younger people or people that have grown up in a much more liberal, soft parenting era that maybe the three of us didn't fully grow up in. So I just wanted to have a real conversation there. You're muted, David.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And I think looking at the states that you laid out that still allow this in schools was also very telling. Yeah, you're right. I mean, you could say that's obviously a states' rights issue, right? Mm-hmm. Some states do it, some don't. But it's also tied to localities, regions, culture, religion, and
economic status.
All of that. Yeah, exactly. Demographics. And so that is all 100% real. I do think, I mean, I want to get back to I want to do this one thing with this article, then I want to come back to your point, because and then we can move past it, because this article, the context for, the context in which this thing happened at this school in Florida was very troubling. So it happened in Florida. There was no like fight or theft involved. It was a misunderstanding about some like preparation for like a holiday party that the students were throwing or something like that. And so you have a female student that's a cheerleader who ends up getting paddled kind of in a rotation by several male staff, right, in a closed room, right? That, I mean, and you have to ask yourself, okay, if we are going to allow these things, and if it is a female student, is there something that needs to be put in place where you have, if you're going to have a male in there, you have to have a female too, right? These are like best practices in school. The female students said that they were kind of laughing and chuckling while it was happening, right? So the actual story that led to the idea of bringing this topic forward, and we'll get deeper into the topic, I think is just criminal. Like if I were her parent, if that were my kid and that happened, and even if I knew it was appropriate in the school setting, the way that it happened, like she was bruised. She had bruises, right? And I guess that's the point. I don't know. So I think so. The article really upset me, and I think I wanted to put that out there. Yeah, she had bruises on her body. So it says it was black and blue and purple, yellow. You could see where all the bruises were already. Okay, so pretty insane. That's terrible. Getting back to like, I think your point, Charles. So you bring up a good point about like, obviously, yeah, discipline happens in different ways in different homes. It happened in a particular way in my home where it needed to happen a couple of times. Right. And then the fear of it was like, I'm not doing that ever again. And to Omar's point, like, when sometimes, when somebody was coming at you with a belt, your instinct is like, you're not going to get me. And I'm like, oh my God, if I laugh right now, I'm going to get it, And so that's all very real. But I think this idea of like, I don't know if this is even a thing, like discipline by proxy. You mentioned like living in a small community where everybody knows each other, there's a connection, and say it's like a you know, you're an auntie or your tia or somebody that your family knows, you have a history with, right? My question here is like, even if the like discipline by proxy, I don't know if it's effective if the person who's, you know, issuing the discipline is like a complete stranger that has no connection, right? Maybe from a different background. And so I think this issue is actually much more complex than just like, is this thing right or wrong? I hear you on that. There's that piece of it. And then I just have a whole lot of questions about like if it's going to be allowed in schools. Well, actually, I also have questions about the origins of this, and maybe hear your thoughts on, you know, where does this come from? You know, the kind of founding religious, like puritanic principles of this country, and it kind of spewed its way into the public education arena. Is it just this idea or this concept of control that Omar was? Because that's really what it is. It's about control, right? Through violence, right? So I wanted to put that out there and see what y'all have to think about that.
I'll go after Omar.
Wait, can I ask a really quick clarifying question? With this young lady in Florida, was there any kind of parental consent previously? Like kind of as in like sometimes, look, y'all, I grew up, even though El Paso is like Mexico light, there's still semblances of Texas in this place. So I understand the Texas thing. I understand a bit of the Southern thing. Sometimes these schools send out like basically like in their parent handbook, hey, you come to the school, this is a thing, you're signing up for it. We can corporally punish your kid, and you're already signing off on it. And some parents don't even know that they're signing off on it in terms of like a student code of conduct thing. Or was this a scenario where like administrators and parents called the parents, shared with them what was going on with the kid, and then had the parent consent? Was there any parent consent whatsoever on this, or do we know?
Good question. I'll look it up. Keep talking.
I think he needed that answered for the rest of his statement.
No, I mean,
okay. Let's see. Okay, here we go. I got it. Let's see. Daniel's mother said she had not given the educator's consent to hit the daughter. That's the mother, right? So there was no consent on the front end. He called the case a non-issue involving a permitted form of discipline that Daniels had consented to. Yeah, I'm not sure. It sounds like the parents are saying no. The school was saying that probably in some kind of a handbook they may have just did like a general sign off, and you know, it's like 10 pages long.
When you're signing all that stuff at the beginning of the school year, you probably just sign that as well. It's terms and agreements of like,
look, I'm
iTunes,
with you because like we have an enormous student handbook. And what we do is we go over major issues of the student handbooks with parents before they come in, before they register, before we sign, because we're like, hey, listen, like, even though you've got this, we just want to bring up these particular issues just so that you know for sure what's going on. So for example, like for marketing purposes, we allow photography and video of personnel within the school. We're always pretty conscientious, even with that signed statement, to be like, hey, like, did we check to see if all the kids that we're videotaping have had that consent? We want to send another message to kids and stuff like that. I mean, even then, we're pretty conscientious. You know, parents get an 85-page student code of conduct, and then they sign off. The next thing you know, they've signed off to being like, yeah, you can corporally punish my kid. Here's their signature. The parents didn't even know. So even though they may have not consented in that specific instance previously, they may have consented to a situation, and that's another issue. Have parents been cognizant or knowledgeable of the fact that these things exist in these states? Have they been warned? Have they been informed? Is this something that states wish to circumvent in order to kind of do what they want to do?
I have more information, and this is important context. So in this particular case, this student at Liberty County High School, the student Daniels was given a choice in the matter between an in-school suspension or corporal punishment for a misunderstanding related to Christmas decorations. That just sounds ridiculous. They presented her with the choice, did not contact the parent. The student felt coerced into opting for corporal punishment over suspension because then she would have missed an important exam and she would have been late for some work or something. So that happened at the school site. The mother is also claiming that she never provided general consent to hit her daughter. So sounds like they probably crossed multiple lines here. Yeah.
Well, look, like I don't have much to add to the article, right? Because the article to me is just non-controversial. It's some crazy shit that doesn't happen. So I didn't know if I was gonna get Charles. So I was like, well, let me spread this out to this larger issue of corporal punishment in general, and society has a lot of different views on it. I completely agree that the details that's inside of this article is ridiculous. Like it's a reason why it made national news. I think it kind of is what it is. You know what I mean? Like I don't know what's gonna be the outcome, and maybe you can keep us posted in a future show on an update if anything comes from it. But I do think that it has some larger societal kind of questions that might be a little more controversial, that people might have some deeper thoughts into. You know what I mean? But so I'll go wherever you all want to go with that. I didn't have much to push back on in the article. It was just crazy. It was wild. I posted it for everybody out there. You can read this crazy article on your own and kind of see the craziness that would be happening in Florida. It is in Florida, so I don't know how shocked one should be, but I love Florida. I like Destin and I like Miami. Love those places, but y'all gonna have some wild stories coming out that joint. Don't trip. I lived in Kentucky and I live in Chicago. There's wild stories out of those places too. So you kind of take it with a badge of honor. But I'll let you jump back in with David just on this around the article, because I want to make sure we're able to deal with what's in that article and put that to bed.
Yeah, I think my opinion is simple in terms of the fact that this is a very sticky situation in terms of the kid is no ability to give consent one way or the other because they're a minor, right? So
there's that too.
If the school's there was consent on this kid's behalf, I'm like, that's not a thing. Child cannot give consent for something like corporal punishment, which is a weird way of trying to stick your way out of it. I think it's extremely negligent of those administrators and those teachers to not have a conversation with a parent about what happened, even beforehand. There's an issue. You talk to the parents. And honestly, even though these states may jump into corporal punishment and so forth, there's too many loopholes here to sit there and be this is now a national issue. This is an issue could absolutely be brought up to a court of law, because whether the parents consented or not, there may be something in the student handbook that says hey, before we do this, there needs to be some conversation or whatnot. I wonder what the fine lines of this are. But I think getting into it, my opinion is this: you'll notice something very similar amongst the states that still allow this. Come on now. Other than our fans in Wyoming, all 1,700 of you all who we love to death in the state of Wyoming, Mississippi, Alabama, Tennessee, Kentucky, Texas, I think we're getting a consistent pattern here. It is an interesting and archaic ideology in that corporal punishment just dude, it doesn't work. And parents think it works. And parents think that spare the rod, spoil the child. Look, dude, even in states
I needed my ass whooped at
Texas,
certain times, bro. I did, man. I'm gonna be real with you.
Hear me out.
I'm just go ahead. I don't think school should ever do it, but
dude, look, my mom whipped the shit out of me with a belt. And whether I needed that or not, I was a kid, and dude, I got my ass whooped. but it's a radically different situation of being accountable to my mom and what goes on in the home, and her spanking me with a belt on the bottom, and then a school up and deciding that they can like lay hands. And like things are sensitive. Like you're trying to tell me that like I have to worry about touching the shoulder of a student that I'm consoling during a very difficult moment, but these cats can just sit here and like bludgeon a young lady. Like, are you like, where's the discrepancy there? Dude? Like that's a situation, right? Even in the state of Texas, there are ways where quote corporal punishment amongst parents can get CPS called. We could call CPS if we find that there's certain bruises in certain places, in certain areas, even with the parents having all the parent rights that they got, CPS can get involved. And I think it lays into like, look, Charles, I'm with you, man. Like, I think that like, did I need the shit kicked out of me by my mom? I don't know, but maybe. Do I honestly like I could get into a larger issue here. Like kids are carrying fucking guns around and people are carrying guns around when really like shouldn't the situation just get solved by like a beatdown a la Friday, but everyone survives, everyone like it's like John Witherspoon in Friday. He's like, we settled things with our hands, but everyone lived to see the next day. Like, yes, it's a funny movie. And yes, there's like, I'm not advocating for violence and fighting, but there was a very storied message that John Witherspoon, the dad on Friday, gave to that, which is things were settled in a which way that didn't have these massive ramifications of like life or death. And I think we're dealing with a situation here where like, is this now a thing? Like in Florida, Texas, everyone else, like you're emboldening all these administrators and you're emboldening all these teachers to be like, well, if this is cool and Florida sets a precedent that this is allowed, are we just going to have administrators and teachers running around wild with like pickleball, the pickle bats, the pickleball paddles, and just start
rackets?
Let's get to that question after this break.
Well, let's get there. We got to take a quick commercial break, but let's keep that energy. Like I think getting into, like I said, the larger societal things. Like I said, I think this Florida thing is crazy. I don't think there's anything there. But I do think this is shaping up to be a great conversation. Come on back with us on the other side. A quick word from our partners.
Today's episode of BS3 Network is brought to you by McDonald's. McDonald's is going to McDonald's and creating a universe for longtime fans of both McDonald's and anime. I love sauce on my McNuggets and can't wait to try the savory chili McDonald's sauce. It's savory, chili, and bold. For decades, across various episodes and genres, McDonald's has shown up in the anime world and most commonly called McDonald's. McDonald's will be bringing the McDonald's world to life with episodic shorts and manga comics. For a limited time, anime fans will have the opportunity to experience their favorite fictional restaurant. You have until March 25th to try the new savory chili McDonald's sauce with your 10-piece chicken nuggets.
And we are back, and welcome to all of our new viewers. There's a lot of you that came today, so that's what's up. And also shout out not just to our YouTube and Twitter people and Facebook fans, but also our Roku fans that have been tuning in and joining us. You are a large part of the reason that we have that partnership with McDonald's Going Anime. So that's pretty cool. So pick back up where you were. I'll throw it to you and let you navigate, Dave.
So Omar was talking about so we can all agree, obviously, that what happened at this school in Florida is wildly inappropriate, right? Should never happen again in the way that it happened. But then going back to the larger issue of like if it's whatever, was it 19 states, 14 states that
19.
allow this, right?
No, 19.
Okay. So
1 from 20.
These are legislatures that are made up of elected officials that, at one point ran for office and people voted for them. So they're the voice of the people. and they are not pushing back on these corporal punishment in school, laws, or the absence of any laws. Is that's even without, there's zero evidence to show that corporal punishment improves behavior outcomes. There's zero proof, evidence, data, research to prove that there's a positive impact on academic performance. We do know that it causes psychological harm. We do know that it can cause physical harm. We do know that it obviously deteriorates the relationship between the student and the staff, right? The adults, because they are hurting your body. Mm-hmm. And we also know that disproportionate impact on vulnerable groups, special education students, right? Low income students, right? This is what we know. So, given all of that, is it something that people should just say hey, well, if Kentucky wants to do it, if Florida wants to do it, if Texas wants to do it, and if parents say that it's okay, where is the line?
Omar, well, I can jump in.
That's a good ass question. No, go ahead, man. I'll jump in.
I mean, listen, man. I put it like this. I think that we're in a different time. I think times have changed. I think there are more resources. I think we know more. I think that there are just different types of tools that are available to people. And I don't know, like you said, there's no data that shows that is actually working.
We've advanced as a civilization, is what you're saying.
I think on some level we have. I do think that, I didn't go to West Point though. I didn't go to I'm not in one of those type of, if you're in an Army S type school or a military boarding school or whatnot, it might not be traditional corporal punishment, but you will be punished in a way that causes some type of physical assertion to exhaustion, whether it's push-ups or things like that. I do know that I played basketball. I was a pretty good basketball player. I had coaches. Some of them were soft and some of them were very, very, very tough. And I love those people. I'm not going to go into names or anything like that because, some of those people are not even alive anymore, but they did go a long way into making me a man. And it wasn't necessarily corporal punishment, but I promise you that a lot of that shit wouldn't fly today. I think a lot of, Omar is in Texas. He is in the land of football, especially little tyke football, high school football. They got kids out there running and doing stuff in 110-degree weather, right? So I think this conversation isn't just a basic, should people be whooping their kids? I think that there are different forms of corporal punishment that we have, like you said, evolved from. But taking all of that into consideration and saying all that, my only purpose in this and what I'm really trying to say in my long, elongated answer that, hopefully that's given Omar his enough time so he can come with it and say something more profound than me is, I am always a little bit more sensitive to this topic, though, because on some level, I am grateful for the type of discipline that was in my life and around me. And while there may not be scientific studies that have proven X, Y, or Z, anecdotally, I know how different my household was and the expectation of me was with that big ass Marine in my house that I called dad. And he didn't just beat my ass all the time, but the threat was always there. And he would show and assert himself in ways when it was needed. And it did. There was a healthy fear there. Now, again, there's a lot of highfalutin new terminology and things like that. I can't shit on that man for raising me the best way he knew how with the tools that he had. Now, my father today, my sister and brother ain't never experienced none of this, right? At that time, my dad went to rehab. My dad's in California. My sister is a princess. She don't know no anger side of my father. The way, I've seen my father have conversations with my sister. I was like, when did you learn those words, Pop? I don't understand it. So I think that there is something just to be said. I want to just honor, it could have been better and that wasn't the best way. So I took it out of the school and kind of put it into this more familial thing because there are people that their life values is what leaks into that classroom. And that's why they think and believe that. I think it should just be something that's just outlawed per se. But if there's, like I said, a military school, whatever, I don't think corporal punishment, because it's a broader definition of it. I can't tell them how to, do everything, but under what we saw, yes, I will say that. Now, that's called a stretch, y'all. For the people that behind the scenes, this is when your producer is doing this. That means stretch. So I can shut up now. Go ahead, O. Do I need to go?
I'm on mute. Oh, there we go. No,
Okay.
man, I'm
Good. It's good.
I didn't need the stretch. I appreciated this stretch because it was badass to get all this context and everything else. Here's three major issues, right? And I'm with David and I'm with Charles on this one. And let me sink it into something that I think Greg Abbott is about in Texas. Like Greg Abbott's all about creating this like parental Bill of Rights, which like for most, it sounds good. And to parents, it sounds good because it's like, we want to know what our rights are. The flawed situation with this like parent Bill of Rights is that it butts up against a shit ton of Texas educational code. And Texas educational code has gone through legal processes, legal precedent, parent forums, legislative processes. It's basically like an ass backwards way of saying we're going to defy legislation. And it's one of these things, guys, that like Doc, we could talk at length on the political show that we'll do one day in terms of like politics and everything else, because I think there's a huge hypocrisy in the state of Texas. On one end, Texas is all about states' rights. Abortion is a perfect example to be like, Texas, states' rights, we get to decide on abortion. But then voting rights come up and they're like, we're the Republican Party and states don't get to decide what they're doing on election laws. There are no states' rights in this situation, as we saw in Georgia, where the state was like, yo, like, you can't just ask for 11,000 fraudulent votes to get, the blonde-haired Kentucky Fried Eating Chicken president to basically, I don't know, steal an election, right? So there's a hypocrisy here politically in that, like, you can't just choose when it's convenient to have states' rights, and when it's not, it's all just like blatant hypocrisy. And like, I don't deal well with hypocrisy and I don't deal well with inconsistencies, right? The second that I'm worried about, David, is what I alluded to earlier, is like, dude, if this sets up some kind of legal precedent where it's just like a court of law says, well, I guess it's cool, does now Tennessee, Kentucky, Missouri, Wyoming, Colorado, Alabama, Texas, like, just start getting to walk around and do things to children without any kind of parent consent that involves physical harm. But I think the third goes back to like, this is such barbaric shit. This is barbarianism, bro. And like, listen, to our parents, like, I'm with you. You want to punish your child in a way that's according with the law, like, that's up to you, yo. And I think that is a parent right to be like, you want to deal with this, cool. And I'll get to Doc's statement because I want to discuss this tangent between parenting in a way that involves corporal punishment and doesn't, right? But like, what the hell is school doing? And this is the conversation why we have a podcast, why it exists, to be like, we were promised jetpacks. We were promised the ability to reform education. Like, we've evolved as a society. How have schools evolved? And I'm like, what the hell kind of law have we not evolved in allowing people to grab like fraternity and sorority paddles and just start paddling children, realizing.
Oh, Omar was spitting that truth, and the system got him.
He's gone. The system got him.
The system got him, man.
Yeah, I want to be clear. I think I said this earlier in the show, and I'm making a distinction between. They got you, man. Greg Abbott got you. But I want to be, before you go again, Omar, I want to be clear. I'm making a distinction between what happens in the home and what happens at school.
Right.
So I think
right.
if mom or dad or uncle or aunt or, in my case, my grandfather with his cane, you kind of knew like it
You
was
hear
coming
those
from a
stories from you,
place.
David.
It was coming from a place of love, right? You're
Right.
like, these people care for me, and I screwed up, and now something's coming my way. But I don't think you don't get to transfer that energy or that connection to like a random educator, right?
Right.
So
Well,
I think that's
because
where the difference is
For the
for me.
record, before we throw it back, because people like to clip things, especially for me when they don't like me. Everybody on this podcast, and I feel safe saying this even about Jubilee, none of us feels that the state, the state should not be issuing physical discipline to children. I want to be very, very clear on that. That was not the controversial topic, right? But it was just around, how we looking at certain things. I just wanted to make sure because somebody's going to try to clip that and say I was caping or advocating for corporal punishment, which I'm absolutely not. I'm saying that
it's too late. It's already. I can see it. It's already on TikTok.
I appreciate my parents.
Kevin Smith talks about it all the time. There's going to be a clip on the internet like Tita Yannard decimates Superintendent Omar Yanar's ass with belt when he was a child. Like I can see the BuzzFeed about it right now. This is what I'm getting at. And David, like, thank you. Because I think you brought up a really good point. Like, you have a clear relationship with your mom and dad, for better or for worse. Do I think it's okay for mom and dad to like get unwieldy in terms of their corporal punishment? Yes, I do. I don't think it's okay, but like, that's not my right to say like, yo, this is the way that you like parent your kid, right? I don't agree with it, but like, at least if it's according to law, I'll protect those things. But dudes, again, you said it, like, there's some rando ass administrator, probably doesn't know the kid, probably doesn't know the situation. And it's also, is this like male on female?
Yeah, it's ridiculous. It's crazy.
That's even worse. Like, what the shit, dude?
I travel all the time. Males can't even pat down females at the airport. Like, it can't happen.
Like, what kind of bumba clot shit is this, dude? I can't for the life of me think how this is even.
It's wild, man.
Okay, it's not just wild. It's so antiquated. This is some like.
But when are these places not egregious though? These places hang their hat on being egregious. I mean, that's what they do. Like, Florida is like, we're gonna be egregious. Texas will not outdo us in the egregious. So I mean, the
competition of just outright stupidity is unbelievable. And it is because, like, ultimately, again, this is what it gets into. You have a male dude hitting a female minor. And I just want to put it there. Like, what audience member is okay with this? And like, is a parent okay with this? Some parents like, well, if she's done wrong, she needs to get like the upper hand. And I'm like, I mean, listen, like Dukes of Hazzard. Like, I thought we got.
Oh, it's worse. It's worse.
Of the General Lee and
so
the stars and bars for a reason, dude.
From the article, and this is how wild it is. They were so eager to go in there and spank me, said Daniels, who said she was struck by assistant principal Tim Davis, a former Major League Baseball player who pitched for the Seattle Mariners. While Principal Eric Willis observed and laughed. They took their time. They watched me. So you have the classic like former athlete that can all of a sudden become like an administrator.
Movie scene is this?
Yep.
It's so unacceptable. And look, let me get more nuanced. If you ask any person, take away Florida, take away situation, take away school, and be like, do you think it's okay for an adult male to hit a female minor under the age of 18? Like, what, dude, unless we're, I don't know, dude, like in Singapore where like their laws are interesting and like, I'm not going to make any assessments on other people's laws, but what, like, where in this country and many other countries is someone going to be like, yeah, it's going to be all right. Like, where is the majority of the opinion of people going to be
Yeah.
that? And it's not. And it's not just this, David. It gets into the fact that, like, I'm glad this is making national headlines because I know Florida is going to double down on this. And dude, Doc's right. Doc is absolutely right. They're going to stand by it. They're like, this is what we do. This is why we are what we are. This is why we do better than everybody else. And I got to tell you, like, you can double down all you want. And like, people love to forget about the facts. But like, what's the psychological trauma that's going to happen to this kid? What's
Yep.
going to happen to these parents? Like, these parents, like, this is a very embarrassing situation for her and for the parents. This is one of those power struggles that we just talked about. So, like, look, recently there's all these articles going around because El Paso, and sadly this happens. But like El Paso, there was an article about a teacher in one of our school districts, a male teacher having like sexual congress with a female student. And the article was really intelligent in not only saying, look, forget about the fact that this is just outright wrong. Even if that child was 18 years old, you're still breaking a law, both legal and ethically, in that the teacher to student relationship is one in which you're now using the power structure to manipulate this child, that's not what education is for. So even with that in consider, and that's against the law, right? This is something that absolutely should be against the law, because even if corporal punishment is something that people in these states want to like acquiesce to, or at least be cognizant of, like, again, where are the lines? Where are the boundaries? Where's the just even critical thought about, is there a female who's doling out this punishment? But to have a male do it with another male witness who's the principal, and then them basically like laughing about this situation, yo, that is a highly traumatizing situation that not only the physical pain, but the embarrassment is going to carry eons. And is this like that? There are people who give educators bad names because there's nothing educational about that moment other than these two people should be immediately fired. They should be put on trial for like illicit activity. They should never be allowed in education again. And them and the school district should get the shit suit out of them for like illicit activity, dude. And I guarantee you, Doc's right. Florida's gonna celebrate this shit, dude.
That's the crazy part.
Unbelievable. It's unbelievable, dude. It really is. I don't know what else to say because it's so. This is out of like a nightmare scenario that like a Quentin Tarantino movie would set up as a scenario to be like, here's the most illicit shit that goes on behind closed doors.
Look at this comment here. My adult male boss wouldn't hit me at work, so why are we allowing this to happen to children? My drill sergeants weren't even allowed to touch us in basic training.
Yeah. I mean, but that's what I'm saying. Like this, that's why I was like, you know, I looked at the topic and I looked at the article and I was just like, it's an outrage. Like and I think we all agree there. But I wanted to try to squeeze something out of the topic in the sense of just like, you know, how do we look at this from a societal kind of standpoint? So for the record, none of us think the state should not be rendering physical punishment in schools to children, like in public schools. It's just not a thing that should happen. I don't have any say over what's happening in a private school setting where people are sometimes asking for this or trying to have a heightened level of discipline or whatever the case is. I know rich kids used to get threatened that they get sent to boarding school and all that stuff, military school. But yeah, I know we're coming up on time, David, but I'm gonna throw it back to you, man. But I think that the larger topic, the larger context, I think there's something or Florida will always give us an education topic to discuss.
I was telling somebody, like, there's always something for us to talk about on this show. There's always education is a fascinating world because we're really not talking about education. We're talking about culture, right? We're talking about politics. We're talking about people, belief systems, all those things. Yeah. So I think just, quickly in closing, I think it's interesting that we're having this show today on what Super Tuesday, right? So we have
dude.
elections happening,
Your Super
you know,
Tuesdays.
across the country. And the country definitely seems to be going on this, like, you know, left turn trajectory, right turn trajectory. This issue of corporal punishment in schools seems to be tied to, you know, like localities and places where that lean a particular way politically, socially. And I think it just calls the question of, like, if we're the United States of America, like, how much, if we're going to be a true United States, like, how much are we going to allow the extremes, right, to operate and function, and allow certain things to happen, at least in the public space, right? At a certain point, we got to say, you know what, we got to all come together on this. It's probably something that could easily be, you know, dealt with by an executive order or something, right? Just sign a piece of paper, just get rid of it. Especially in light that it does no good. It only causes harm to children. And so, yeah, those are my closing thoughts. Thank you for you know, letting me bring this topic forward. I wasn't sure how the show was going to go, but I'm glad that we ended up where we ended up.
It's all good. Throw it to good Omar.
I worry a lot about, and I'm going to take this in a different direction, a bit in the political direction, about what kind of precedent we're setting. So this is now the second show, guys, where, like, hey man, there was a legal precedent that I agreed with, where parents in California who felt like there was a massive injustice done in funding to low-income neighborhoods for educational work after COVID was won by the parents. And that was truly, like, yo, we talk about, like, you know, Doc talks about, like, you know, being like, we're out here on our own agency. How are we taking up responsibility for organizations that are doing wrong? This was, I think, a good example of parents raising up, creating an issue that needed to be addressed, and it was addressed, and it created a legal precedent that I thought was, like, cool. Like, this is something where parents were heard. This is a situation that I worry about getting into courts in Florida, where the courts in Florida are like, yeah, this is cool. This is okay. And for anyone wondering, like, I know, because I'm with Jon Stewart on this one 100%, in that, like, we got these two people to choose from. And I wish this was not the situation in terms of our presidential election.
Nikki took DC. Nikki took DC, you know.
Yeah, dude.
She won DC. Maybe she's in the game.
There's that. Who knows?
I mean,
yeah.
I'd love to see if she's in the game. But even then, like, you know, I've got issues with Nikki Haley, but, you know, good for her. I'm happy that she's still in the game. I'm happy that she's still doing this thing. No, not really. I don't really give a shit. Honestly, because if you looked at her voting record and what she's done as a governor, like, she's
it was really a joke. I knew that was going to get you going.
I took it and ran with it, man. Took it and ran with it. But, like, when people are like, my vote doesn't matter, or like, why do I vote, or why should I give a shit? And it's because, like, right now, dude, like, I'm worried about the Supreme Court. Like, I'm worried about Clarence Thomas and his, like, endless string of corruptions that started with basically his sexual violation and sexual misconduct with Anita Hill, to just outright just being bought and sold. Bought and sold. You have a Supreme Court justice who's bought and sold. Same with Alito. And, like, you know, you've got these three goofballs, Kavanaugh and Amy Barron Cohen, who are just like, you know, I'll have to think of the third installation. I think it was Alito, like, that Trump put in. And I'm like, these people are bought and sold. And this is what matters in a presidential election, is thinking of, like, the courts. And the courts were, like, supposed to be our place where we found justice, right? Or we hope to find justice. And if this Florida case gets into the court and Florida decides that this is okay, I know where it's going to go in the Supreme Court. And if the Supreme Court says it's totally cool to do this, like, have we just totally gone into?
Well, they would say it's a state. They wouldn't say it's okay. They would say it's a state's issue.
It's states' rights.
It's a states' right issue.
Exactly. So we're going
which would probably encourage some other states to be like, oh, maybe we should look at this.
Yeah.
Let's look at the research.
I mean, all states included. So look, I think that it's wonderful when we get into topics that kind of interlude the sociological, the political, and all this stuff. But like, I'm glad we brought this on the show because like this shit's crazy. This shit's crazy. And the fact that we had a whole show to talk about whether it's okay for an adult male with another adult male who is sitting there just either observing, laughing, or acquiescing. That's like Hitler type shit, honestly, like in terms of like Hitler and the whole German army. Basically,
this man don't went to Hitler.
Yeah, dude.
My man don't went to Hitler.
Choose to do nothing in the face of tyranny are just as guilty, if not more guilty. And this principal, straight up guilty. He could have interjected. He could have said something. Instead, he participated. And that's sending a dangerous precedent, Charles, and for everybody else who's school administrators to be like, now those cats are lawless? Now, like, they're above the law? It was enough to have Trump above the law. Now we got these two bumbaclot, peachy, like so-called professionals in Florida being above the law. Like, this ain't Steven Seagal and shit. I don't need that shit in our schools. So I say fire them, sue them, and set a precedent that this is not okay in the state of Texas, Florida, Georgia, or wherever else in the United States.
Yeah, and there's just a visual there as Charles is going into his closing thoughts, so people that are watching can see the visual of states. I don't think there's a connection between the red color they're using here. I think it's just maybe that's just what they decided to use. Those are not necessarily Republican red states, but those are the states where this is still allowed. And then allowed but expressly prohibited for students with disabilities are the orange states, and then does not expressly prohibit, so kind of a gray area, are the yellow states. There you go. Charles.
Yeah, I think that we beat this topic. Oh, I wasn't even trying to be a pun, brother. I really wasn't. But I think that we have obliterated this topic. I think that, just for the record, I don't think that there shouldn't be corporal punishment in schools at this point anywhere. So I definitely want to make sure I say that. I will just say thank everybody that showed up today. This is one of our biggest shows ever. Live is still growing as we're talking and closing. So you can join us every Tuesday at 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific. The replay airs live on Fridays at the same time. But yeah, and I also wanted to just thank, and I think what also brought people here, a lot of us, I was a writer. I guess I still am a writer. But I did just publish a new article where I see a lot of people comment on that article are also here watching. And so I'll just say and go in a different direction like Omar did. Listen, when I'm traveling the country, one of the things that I teach all the time when I'm working with parents is that grades do not equal proficiency, and this seems to be something that's catching on, and there's a lot of people doing that work. It's one of those things that I kind of take for granted that people know or don't know, but I wrote this in 5 minutes, and it is kind of doing numbers. So we linked it. It is linked. You can go and check that out. Thank you for continuing to support, and we hope that you continue to support us as we continue to grow. Jubilee sends her love and all her well wishes to everybody. And I just want to thank the fellas. I think that, topics like this, I don't always see the vision for it, man, but I think David, I think you're on to something when you had this. And I would just say, I think shows like ours are important for a few different reasons. One, I think that people have highfalutin terminology that speaks above their intended audience and not to them. I think that there's a lot of professionals that's talking to each other and is not really serving the people that it needs to serve. I'm a firm believer that if you are truly intelligent and care about this stuff, you should be able to talk to the people that's directly affected, and you should be able to hand power to them or help them open up their power so they can do something about it. And that's what it seems like is actually happening ultimately in this case, is that something happened. They are organizing. They're talking about parent season on this to kind of end this thing, and we'll see if that actually works. I do believe this, though. If you believe in parent choices, if you believe in parent empowerment and parent voices, but only when it's topics that you agree with, then you don't believe in parent voices. It is like the people that work hard to get everybody to go vote, and then you realize a certain group of people is not voting the way you want them to vote, and you stop pushing that ideology. I think that we are at a time in our country where values has to become a real thing again. I didn't grow up with like this whole set of values. I'm gonna be honest with you. I grew up, I was poor. The value was money would fix things, I think, and I've had to unlearn that stuff as I've gotten older, and that's still something that I'm trying to unlearn. What are the rules that you live your life by? What are the rules that govern how you see things and how you don't see things? If you can smear on one side, then don't be surprised if they smear on the other. So I just don't like this one-sided nastiness that I've been seeing in this country. And I think that is all the more reason why shows like this exist. We're not telling you how to think. We want to tell you to think. And we want to give you those options. And wherever you land is where you land. But for Jubilee, that's Omar, that's David. And for BS3 Network and Dr. CC Publishing, I'm Charles Cole. And you can see us same bat time, same bat station. Y'all take care of each other out there.